Welcome back to Blunt Business. Glad to have you all with us. My next guest, we're actually returning a company back on the program. We're welcoming back a company that works with a wide array of cannabis companies, including large multi-state operators, single-state operators, and small mom-and-pop shops. So they full spectrum. They are able to support large cannabis operators and craft boutique operators in different ways. So we like the big guy and the little guy are being taken care of by the folks at Vangst. Vangst. You're familiar with them. We had their CEO, Karson Humiston, here on the program back in, it was August 2019, I believe. And we welcome now Kelsea Appelbaum, who's head of community partnerships onto the program. Thanks for being with us, Kelsea.
Hi, how are you?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for making time to join us. So, as I mentioned, we spoke with your founder and CEO back in 2019. Great conversation. We really talked a lot about her and just the plight for her as a woman, as a leader in the cannabis industry. That was really some of the focus of that episode. Because a lot of things were coming out, a lot of accolades were being given. I didn't get a lot of time to talk about the platform. I want to do that today. So back then, she did talk about the Vangst platform and how it has progressed today. As new Cannabis Ventures explained, the platform helps to pair prospective employees with cannabis companies. Candidates create a profile. Vangst helps them to achieve the necessary credentials depending on the state. Cannabis companies can use Vangst to help find qualified candidates and maintain optimal levels of staffing, whether they need full-time gig workers or a mix of both. And when a gig worker finds their way through Vangst, that person's a W-2 employee, clocks in, clocks out, receives payment through the platform. And most recently, the platform has recently launched a training offering so candidates can learn about topics like cannabis retail and compliance, very important today, so they can stand out during the application process and be more prepared for their first day on the job. So it's been a couple of years, pandemic happened, and now the growth in the hiring of the process of the cannabis industry has matured since then. Talk to me about, how Vangst has continued to answer the call.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the overview. It makes my life easier. Yeah, we definitely have progressed over the past few years when it comes to that hiring platform. And really every progression that we've made is to answer the needs of individuals looking for a job, as well as companies that are actively hiring. And like you mentioned, those companies range from the largest companies in cannabis all the way to brand new organizations and new markets. And they all have varying levels of needs. Something that we actually learned recently is that most companies in cannabis don't actually have the ability to build out a careers page, and or they haven't invested the energy into doing it themselves. So something that Vangst is really excited about is anybody that works with us is able to actually have a free careers page integrated onto their website through our Vangst platform, which just allows more access for candidates to learn about opportunities on their team. And then, of course, allows companies to hire great individuals. So really for us, our hiring platform is catered to the people that are looking for roles and companies that are looking to hire. And every adjustment that we make and every addition that we make is really to serve them.
Now, I wanted to ask also, when it comes to the training that you're offering now, can you tell me how intricate, how detailed is it when it comes to finding about areas in the retail process, the seed to sale tracking, compliance? Because we know now that, and I'm wanting to find out really how rampant is it right now? I mean, how an appealing position is it? Are there a lot of companies offering good quality salaries for compliance? Are there a lot of jobs out there for compliance? Because it sounds like from a guest we had on that I just recorded with recently, from that's running a bachelor's and master's degree program in the business of cannabis. They're talking especially about trying to go ahead and educate in compliance specifically, because they know that that's going to be such a major factor once legalization is rolled out, depending on which compliance software will reign supreme, things like that. I wanted to find out how much compliance is really embedded, how much training is there.
Yeah, so we're actively building out our training programs, and we want to make sure that they are indicative of truly what our clients are looking for within a candidate workforce. So TBD on what specifics you're going to see. Happy to keep you updated there, but that's going to be coming soon. In terms of the compliance piece, I think all of us know that compliance is really the cornerstone of the regulated industry right now. Every individual that joins a team needs to have an understanding of compliance, understand how their role actually contributes to being compliant within a regulated space. So of course, as we're building out education, we want to be cognizant of that. But I will be sure to keep you posted on what that looks like specifically.
I'm sure we'll continue to follow along on that. Now, as more states begin to legalize, more and more people are considering the thought of leaving their federally regulated jobs completely and entering into the industry themselves. In addition to using cannabis freely, which is always an issue when it comes to drug testing, we'll talk about that after the break. There are a number of benefits that cannabis industry employees have reported. Now, on the latest information I found out when it comes to the job market for cannabis right now, the MJ Biz Fact Book has reported that it's right now expected to support between 425 and 520,000 full-time jobs in the U.S. Could go up to 670,000 by 2025. That's the latest I've seen on that. With that said, the perks. So according to Vangst's new 2021 salary guide, more than 50% of all surveyed companies provided paid time off, medical, dental, and vision insurance. More than 1/3 of surveyed companies provided 401ks, remote work schedules, and long or short-term disability support. Now, the other thing I read a lot about as well is when you look at the younger demographic of the workforce and the great resignation, as they talk about. Talk to me about the changes in benefits and the other perks that cannabis industry candidates are being persuaded by.
Yeah. It's always funny when these questions come up because I can't help but think of when I joined Vangst 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there were no benefits. I don't even know if we had benefits now that I think about it. It's all kind of a blur. I remember joining the team and we were sitting in like a 10 by 10 room trying to figure out how to even recruit within cannabis and do that effectively in regulated markets. And a big selling point for some of our clients was that they actually had benefits because back in 2016, 17, 18, that really wasn't the standard. There's a lot of challenges in order to get benefits in place at mass for employees within technically federally illegal industry. So seeing some of those statistics and understanding how just workforce has evolved is really incredible to see. I think anybody that's been in the industry, especially on the plant touching side, as long as at least I have, you see that progression in real time. You see that 5 years ago, a 401k was not offered, I don't think, with any of the companies that we worked with.
Right.
And if so, maybe one or two. And now, especially on the ancillary side, it's very standard. And then plant touching, it's also incorporated within their business models as well. So it's really interesting to see the evolvement of it. That being said, there's still a long way to go. And we need to make sure that as we are growing and the demands for strong talent are continuing to increase, that the benefits that we offer align with what individuals are seeing outside of the industry. What's interesting too is looking at the pandemic, we ended up being in a situation where going into the pandemic, especially at Vangst, and I think any other cannabis company, we had no idea what to expect. We had no idea if this was going to affect our industry in a negative or positive way. Just like every other space, we were confused. And what was beautiful is seeing that the response to cannabis was really positive. It was considered an essential industry. It was deemed essential in almost every single market. It was contributing to economic stability and also allowing for individuals that worked in cannabis to still continue to be able to represent their employers, and then also attracted individuals that weren't in cannabis to actually consider cannabis as a legitimate job sector to consider.
That industry having a full disconnect, losing the employees, turnover, and then bringing them returning back to work. Instead, you just had a readjustment. That readjustment now is the remote work aspect. And listen, I mean, if you can offer enough to get somebody to the office, but the pandemic just provided the fact that now with any job, even for us at Cannabis Radio, we haven't returned to any studios. Our studios are within our homes. We stayed remote, and we're still as effective or more effective than before. Yeah, now, I can understand those that want to do the hybrid of a couple days for collaboration, for team working in office, and then remote other days. I mean, the companies that are looking to reach out to these potential employees, they know they have that leverage now. So how of those in that salary guide, what can you tell me when they were surveyed about how much they have to, the concessions they have to give when it comes to remote working?
Do you mean in terms of benefits that they have to offer?
Well, no, just that the companies, they're not going to get somebody in person physically in the office every day.
Yeah. So within remote working in cannabis, for a lot of companies, that's an option, but for others, it's not, right? You can't have somebody who's leading up a large cultivation facility work from home. That's just not possible, right? Those plants.
And that's clear.
Yeah.
The cultivators, the grow houses, you can't do that at all. But then it's
those
the ones that are administration, the ones that are going to be in the infrastructure, working, administrative specifically, or middle management, things like that.
Sure. I think it's pretty standard still, right? Most companies that we've seen are flexible at this point. Even at Vangst, we have the option to go into the office. I probably go in maybe once or twice a week, but there's no requirement. It's really just, I think, something that companies create opportunities for in terms of collaboration and culture building, but it's not something that we're typically seeing is a true requirement at this point. I think that'll probably change. I think a lot of companies do miss actually being in an office with people and what that does to their culture, but we're not seeing a mass trend of everybody saying we are officially going back to office full time. It's likely going to be a slow build to that.
And then on top of that, what is it, for the companies themselves, how much are they saving by removing that office space off their bottom line? Or if they're having the issues of the equipment they had to give. If it's just laptops you're just sending off, you know, and assigning them and putting them out, or just giving some kind of a stipend for those people, the kind of money they're getting so they can get the equipment they need. And, it's really, all your resource management software, that's going to still be remote for everybody to go work off of. Yeah. So any collaboration tools are there for you. And any other software when it comes to what you need to do, and just really to continue to work, Zoom calls, obviously, like we're doing now, all that's available. So there's got to be a come to Jesus moment for companies. Yeah, unless you pay overspend on the salary for that to get the office structure back, I don't think companies want to do that now, especially if they're corporate size. They're going to say, well, we're going to just try to keep cutting corners.
Yeah, I think every company is a little different, right? Like some people see the dollar sign as just that they can save money. Others say it's a worthwhile investment if that leads to better retention, right? There is discussions in the industry of if we continue remote, how do we know that people are truly bought in, right? We want them to really live and breathe our company culture and values. And that's something that came more naturally to people when they were working in an office and really seeing what they were working towards. But it's a balance, right? No company is going to have the same standards as the next. They're all going to really do what's best for them. I think that what we're finding on the candidate side is that candidates don't want to really consider opportunities that are solely focused on in-office, especially on the administration side. So on that administrative side, they want to be able to have a flexible work from home schedule. Of course, there's roles that still require you to be in office every day. But the ones that aren't, candidates are really craving that dual work life.
We're going to go to commercial break. When we come back, I'm here with Kelsea Appelbaum, Head of Community Partnerships at Vangst, here on Blunt Business. Back after a short break.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
Welcome back to Blunt Business here on CannabisRadio.com. I'm here with Kelsea Appelbaum, the Head of Community Partnerships at Vangst. Vangst is VANGST.com. Make sure to check out the website as we continue. One of the stories that really came up that we learned about that definitely heated some commentary from your team at Vangst. Marijuana Moment recently reported, quote, the U.S. Department of Transportation is proposing a new drug testing policy that could have significant implications for workers who use marijuana off the job. The current policy mandates urine testing, which advocates and experts view as problematic because, one, THC metabolites can show up in a person's urine for up to weeks or months after consumption, resulting in false positive tests for people who are not actually impaired on the job. And the practice of forcing workers to urinate in a collection jar is also viewed as a particularly invasive procedure. Now there's a notice in the Federal Register published late last month. The department's recommending that testing of oral saliva is an alternate option. The proposal says there will be a 4 nanogram per milliliter screening test off for THC, which would detect use of marijuana while eliminating possibilities of positive tests resulting from passive exposure. So taking away the traditional drug testing method and oral swabs. And this recommendation is based on use from HHS that concluded that a 4 nanogram per milliliter screening test cutoff would detect use of marijuana while eliminating positive tests. Talk about this consequence of what this would do if the drug testing now for those coming into work, this is outside of the cannabis industry or in. If they need to worry about drug testing, if they decide to go this route, and oral swabbing is the new method to go with, what do you think?
Well, I think it's progress, right? And to me, that's always a win. In cannabis, a lot of times we're fighting an uphill battle because there's so much, especially from the federal level, that it's just how we've done it. So we're going to continue doing it this way. And it's not necessarily what's indicative of the progressions that we've seen. Specifically in this instance, this is a much better option. And I think advocates are seeing it as somewhat of a win, but it's definitely not something that we're going to continue having discussions about, because is it really a true win if there's still drug testing in place, right? Especially if somebody is a medical consumer. So really, as the industry progresses, the conversations that we're hearing is what's the next step, right? We've advocated for better drug testing policies, which are more accurate and feel a little bit more inviting for people. But is that all? Is that where we're going to stop? And I think that the next step that I am at least hearing in the community is, well, what now? How do we ensure that individuals that use cannabis in a regulated medicinal capacity, how do they have safe access to jobs and are able to actually work in different industries, specifically this, if they are still going to be looked at in a negative fashion for using cannabis. Now, granted, this isn't something that's all encompassing across all industries. So individuals with medical backgrounds that use cannabis medicinally, there are other options, but this is still progress. Hopefully there's more progress, but it is still a good step.
And then also we consider there are certain positions within the cultivation versus the dispensary that you would need to have varying levels. If somebody's going to operate any machinery, that they would be concerned of how impaired they might be. They might be ingesting or consuming cannabis, but is there a certain level of degree that they should be somewhat not impaired so that they're, so they do not become a hazard in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, from a compliance standpoint, either at the state or market level, as well as within company SOPs, most companies don't allow you to consume while on working hours. That's something that, especially within our gig employments, candidates, we definitely educate them on. Just because you're working in a dispensary doesn't mean that you can be consuming cannabis during working hours. So if that's not something that's mandated by local markets, that's also something that employers typically have within their SOPs. So really the risk of that, in my mind, doesn't seem extremely high. I think from trepidatious lawmakers, it seems higher. But the reality is that I think people think it's a privilege to work in cannabis, right? People know that if they are going to be operating machinery, if they are going to be working in such a compliant and regulated space, that requires them to really be working at their optimal capacity, which in some people's mind means that they shouldn't be consuming. That's up for personal debate, but it's not really something that we hear too much of. Really, in all my time at Vangst, I think that I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that we've gotten feedback that somebody has actually consumed on site. I don't even know if it's been even 5. It's just not very often, because I think that it's something that candidates and individuals working in this space understand it's a privilege, and they don't want to break compliance, and they also don't want to put their job at risk. They're working. It's still a job. Just because you're interacting with cannabis doesn't necessarily mean you have to consume it.
Moving along, Lexology recently wrote a report on equity compensation for cannabis employees. This caught my attention. Talking about potential employee traps. Quote, cannabis employees should be wary of companies that offer equity compensation in lieu of any pay at all. Employees with equity stakes have some legal protections as employees and minority owners, and they can potentially negotiate for greater protections in the company's governing documents. Many of the rights and protections mirror what any minority owner of a closely held company would benefit from. If, as described above, there is a worry that the company's owners will drain cash by paying themselves excessive salaries, it is in the employees and other minority shareholders' interests to require the company mandate no salaries or maximum salaries for owners and proportional distributions otherwise. That means if the company is making money and the majority owners want to pull cash out of it, minority owners like employees would also get a proportional cash distribution. And so the negotiation must occur before the employee accepts compensation arrangement. I haven't heard about this part, but that's interesting, where you have a company not paying salaries but offering equity stake in the company itself. What about the issues here?
Yeah, this is not new. I wish that this was something that has actually been covered more extensively in the past. I've had the privilege and opportunity to contribute to license applications in 15, soon to be 16 markets. And every market has good things going and also some areas of improvement. And something that we've seen a lot of in the past is that there are predatory policies that companies can try to get away with. And these aren't necessarily our clients. This is just the industry as a whole. And the industry is
that clear. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And we, by the way, we want to make sure that every individual that's employed through Vangst gets paid. We don't pay out candidates through equity. They get a salary, a paycheck, an hourly wage, whatever it may be. But what we see is in the industry is that there are predatory practices like this. These predatory practices typically happen when there isn't an advisor that's actually giving that company good insight into how to navigate the license application process in an ethical capacity. So they're not working with a licensing firm or they're not partnering with Vangst to look for candidates to represent their license. And what they're doing is they're going off book per se and trying to take advantage of individuals. What you are finding a lot is that as the dialogue around social equity is continuing to increase, rightfully so. Companies are trying to find the loopholes into still getting access to the licenses that they wanted by taking advantage of individuals that could qualify for social equity licensing opportunities. It's not right. It's something that I've spoken a lot about in the community, but it definitely exists. What my recommendation would be for anybody that's considering contributing to a license application in new or existing markets is understand what the company's values are. A company that has strong values should not be afraid to pay you. They should be excited to pay you. They should be excited to invest in you in all aspects. And that starts from licensing. So just because you want to get on a license or just because you want to contribute to a license application in a new market doesn't mean that you should just jump at the only opportunity if it's not a good one. You should really wait for the right opportunity so that you're taken care of versus taking advantage of.
Yep. We're going to go to another commercial break. Before we go to break, I got to make mention of that. It's just, wow, that is iffy. Very shady to see something like that that's actually offered. And I really never knew about that, but I want to make sure the audience was aware. If you are looking to be a candidate or you're looking to go and change where you are in employment, this is something you need to keep an eye on. If a company's doing this, I would want to just say, there's one thing to be say, like if you're working sales and it's commission only. But it's this right here where it's like, okay, you don't have any guarantee of what any kind of money is and there's no salary to it. I don't even know how you go ahead and pull out any kind of funds for yourself and what kind of a structure it is, the frequency of payment on top of that. That is all something I would never want to be a part of myself. But for those out there, hey, buyer beware. You need to keep an eye on that.
Look, equity to me is a bonus, right? It's something that you should see in addition to being taken care of financially. A company should always want to pay you because you're putting your time and energy and effort into being successful within their organization, and they should appreciate that. If they want to show appreciation solely through compensation, that's fantastic. But it should be something that if they're offering equity, it should be in addition to that, not in lieu of it. You really should be taken care of. And this is not new. I'm surprised that this is something that's just kind of getting around right now because these are things that we've seen for years. And like I said, that's kind of the beauty of, I think, working with us. If there are opportunities where we contribute to license applications is we either let you know, hey, this is an opportunity for you to contribute and it's unpaid because it is truly an unpaid opportunity and or it is paid and this is why. But we try to make it as clear as possible. And that's typically mandated by the client. That being said, we really don't see that many unpaid opportunities with this at all. And definitely not with equity in lieu of that.
And not to mention, if you're going to show honor to your employees, start up a 401k and match the contributions. That's what you do. That's what you do.
Yeah.
But, I don't know what that's like. I never had a company like that. And if I did, sometimes with me, when it comes to what I've done for employment, I worked in corporate the first 7 years or so of my existence. And I got here to where I'm at with this company that runs Cannabis Radio, among other entities. And I'll tell you, I don't miss much of doing, having the chance of having a Roth IRA being contributed into or 401k. Or some of the benefits that were offered. It's just, I think, just the way that the way that candidates look at things now and look at the job market. It's really it's opened up a lot. You can do a lot of different options. You don't have to go the same route as everybody else. And the industry is also progressive enough. They know, well, we have to go and change with the times, and we're going to be as flexible as we can to get the right people hired. Yeah. I want to go ahead and talk about that because I want to ask, you kind of really brought up some things, and this was from the idea of the gig economy. You referenced that just before. And I mentioned it at the start about the training and some of the new things that are being added on with Vangst. I want to ask about that. And, the progress of Vangst since we did talk to Karson back in 2019, a lot of things that she mentioned she was going to do with the company. I want to see where the progress is. We're here with Kelsea Appelbaum, head of community partnerships at Vangst. And that's, again, VANGST.com. Check that out as we go to commercial break. We'll be right back.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
I'm back with final questions with Kelsea Appelbaum, head of community partnerships at Vangst. And we'll let people know how you can go and get yourself signed up to go and be a part and let Vangst work with you on your next deployment opportunity, your next dream job, if you will. So you mentioned the gig economy, and I mentioned earlier in the episode how one of the things you're offering now is where through the Vangst platform, that person is a W-2 employee, clocks in, clocks out, receives payment through the Vangst platform. So it's essentially the Uber model, which I love that model. And I will say I've done some work with them in the past, and I will not confirm or deny that I don't work with them now. But the thing is that I like the flexible part-time extra income that I could put in and just throw away and just put away, because that's what it is right now for me. Talk to me about that. And what's the spectrum of jobs available for gig economists?
Yeah. Love always talking about this because I'll never forget when we were in the room in late 2017 actually talking about this. And it really did just come from a collaboration within our team and saying, we can actually make this something that really benefits our industry, and to see where it is today is incredible. I was actually just talking with Karson, our CEO, and we've officially hit 200,000 gigs roles that we've actually filled.
That's huge. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So to see that milestone over the past 5 years has been incredible. Really the response with gigs is just to create more employment opportunities for individuals. What you find in cannabis is that, yes, there's a lot of full-time roles, but there's also a lot of needs that companies have around temporary support, and finding individuals that have actually had experience, are eager to work and eager to contribute to a company's success in a temporary capacity is enormous. So it's been really fantastic seeing the growth there. In terms of roles, it's really dependent on the company, right? Within the gigs model, we see, of course, some of the more support level roles within cannabis, such as production associates, harvest associates, bud tenders, et cetera. But we're also seeing that somebody might need coverage for a staff accountant that's going on maternity leave. And they don't really necessarily want to bring somebody in internally at a full-time capacity. They want to have somebody that's contracted through Vangst just because we built that trust with them. So a lot of times when we talk about gigs, yes, we're looking at lower level support roles that are more temporary needs, but we're also looking for higher level coverage that just might not be a full-time need that a company has.
Right. And I meant the gig workers, not gig economists. That's slipped. But either which way, it's a good thing to have. And I can imagine there's certain jobs that have that. I mean, right now you have delivery services in various states right now, and I can imagine that's a great way to go ahead and have one of these kind of companies. We've even featured on Blunt Business and say, hey, you know what, you can do this Uber model yourself and get people out there to go and do the deliveries, add their time, pick them up. And now, with that said, are you doing anything where you have an app or anything like that? Where is it just really just that you're having people just clock in, clock out, and then you're helping with their payroll services? Is it something where you're also controlling where there's like, if there is a shipment or delivery or some kind of a project, and then they're dinged about it, and then they have to respond within a certain amount of time to be hired for that particular temporary spot?
Yeah, we are always working to improve. And there are a lot of features probably that I can't talk about too much just yet that lead exactly to that, right? We want this to feel more intuitive for people. We want people to get a notification saying that there is an opportunity in their area and are they excited for it? Mm-hmm. We're already doing that, but we're always looking to optimize it. So currently anybody in our network, which now has 80,000 plus people, they're getting notified at least weekly, if not daily, on what opportunities exist in their area. That's how we keep up with the demand. That being said, this is not where we're going to end up. We're constantly evolving that. I was just in a meeting yesterday with our product and engineering team to understand what the next phase of growth is. And it's pretty incredible. Things that I don't even realize are happening behind the scene are really going to make candidates and make individuals looking for employment in cannabis even more excited to work with Vangst because of these features. Nobody else is doing that. We want to make sure that individuals have access to jobs in cannabis in any way that they choose, right? Something that's fantastic about the gigs model is that you can start off doing a contract harvesting role and then a week later be employed full-time with that company. I think anybody that's applied for a job in cannabis knows that it's really difficult to actually get something across the finish line. The competition's really high. It might be really hard to get in with a company that you're excited about. And this gives people access. Starting at that level and having an opportunity to at least have the door open could create a really long-term opportunity for them. And we see that happening every day.
Fantastic. Now, we're going to go and wrap things up and go ahead and talk about Vangst itself. For those that you haven't had a chance, go to the website yet, please make sure to go and look right now. Vangst, VANGST.com. And we mentioned Karson, who was founder and CEO of the company back in 2019 as a guest on the program. And recently she spoke with Biz Journals. Said the company is looking to build out the staffing platform, add key features in training and payment products for cannabis employees, and talked about doubling the current staff as it eyes new market opportunities across the country. She said this, quote, "The cannabis industry is experiencing huge regulatory tailwinds. New markets are opening at a fast rate due to strong public sentiment, pandemic-stretched state budgets, and mounting legislative pressure at the federal level. Cannabis businesses are high-margin businesses with massive expected growth. Vangst is positioned perfectly to support the explosive hiring needs." So let's tell people how to go ahead and go right now to the website, what they can do about starting their own employee profile and letting potential employers look at them and hire them.
Yeah. So what we always encourage individuals to do is create a profile on Vangst.com. That allows you to upload your resume, really create a well-rounded profile that highlights your accomplishments, your background, and then, of course, start networking. We do have companies that are constantly posting jobs. We have about 2,000 jobs actively posted on there right now. So individuals are able to actively apply to any of those roles, as well as connect with any of our recruiters. By connecting with our recruiters, you're able to access even more opportunities that may not even be listed on Vangst.com, as they may be confidential. So for us, starting with creating a profile is always going to be the first step. And then it really opens up a window of opportunities to actually get employment within cannabis.
And also one of the things I noticed on the website is a expert level talent matching, so you can schedule consultation. Talk to me how that entails.
Sure. So something that we realized as we were building out Vangst and growing is that sometimes candidates just wanted to talk to a company. They didn't necessarily want to go through a recruiter, which is where we really started building out our hiring platform, which incorporates a job board. That job board allows individuals, just like they do on other job boards, to actually apply directly with the company and not have to go through a Vangst recruiter. So we're seeing people get employed every single day that don't even talk to recruiters should they not want to. They're able to apply to a job within any of those 2,000 ones that are posted and actually create employment opportunities for themselves directly. And that's both for contract roles as well as full-time positions.
And I got to tell you, I'm looking at your LinkedIn page, and I'm really, so you've been over 5 years at Vangst, and you've moved up that ladder so well. And you can see like every year, okay, bump up. And that's really the epitome of where you want to be at. And now you're vice president of partnerships. I mentioned head, but VP of partnerships. And when you look at that, I mean, obviously it's like practice what you preach. You want that Vangst is trying to go ahead and provide just for their own team the kind of level of employee support that you would hope all the other companies are looking to follow.
Yeah, I think it's always funny looking at my career because it makes me want to just continue advocating for our industry. I joined Vangst as the 8th employee. I've currently been here longer than anybody else. And I had no idea what I was walking into. We were, like I mentioned before, in a 10 by 10 room. I was using, I think, our CEO's father's old laptop. I took a chance on a company that didn't really have any infrastructure in place and was really integral in some of the building blocks that have taken place over the past 5 years. And especially working with a female-led company, it's opened up so many opportunities. We don't just look at people as employees. We really want to nurture them and invest in them. And I think that something that I'm really proud of in my own career is that I've been able to be treated so fairly and given so many opportunities by a company that just wants to contribute to overall success within employees within cannabis. So I love seeing my journey because I hope that everybody else that we place has the same journey. You know, I see it within the placements that I made when I was recruiting at Vangst. I recruited in almost 30 markets within the cannabis sector, more so than any at the time, if not still. And a lot of the individuals that I placed within mid-level leadership roles in 2017 are now VPs and executives for the largest cannabis companies in the world. And we all get to kind of come together and actually relish in the excitement of actually seeing that journey. So I love looking at my story and seeing individual stories that I've impacted and actually using that as a case study for why you should actually join cannabis, right? We're not just an essential industry, but we're an industry that actually invests in your growth. There's more opportunities in this industry than any other.
And we're going to leave it at that. Again, Vice President of Partnerships at Vangst, Kelsea Appelbaum, thanks for being with us here on Blunt Business. So glad to have you on. Thanks for sharing time with us.
Yeah, it was so great chatting with you.
Absolutely. And listeners, thanks again for listening in. You know where to find the show. Every major podcast portal, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher. Look for us, share the word, and we'll talk to you next time. The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.